it's me, Anne-Marie Cox, and I've just finished reading The Fourth Fit of Snark by David Denby. And where to begin? It's the longest chapter. It was definitely the most work I've done, which means, of course, what I'm doing is not Snark, since Snark is not work. And what reminds me that we are now going to read some more things that David Denby has observed about Snark in the past chapter. Snark is hazing on the page. Snark prides itself on wit, but it's closer to a leg out in a school corridor. Which reminds me to say, is Snark by or against outsiders? Because he has this whole insider-outsider thing about Snark, and he seems to always be suggesting that Snark is like the outsider's attempt to get inside. But as someone who fell victim to the whole leg in the hallway thing, I'm pretty sure that that's something that the jocks pull on the nerds, not the other way around. Snark pretends to be all in fun. Snark seizes on any vulnerability or weakness it can find. Snark exploits race and gender prejudice. Snark razzes pomp, but it razzes a certain kind of strength, too. Snark is the sour underside of a liberated media. Snark and the media are co-enablers. Snark is always simple-minded. Snark reads people on sight often by reducing them to a trait, a label, a moniker denoting failure. Snark functions as the avant-garde of resentment. Someone will have to explain to me what that means later. Snark is about punishment. And lastly, Snark functions as ill humor applied to humor. Oh, wait. Snark functions as ill humor applied to the universal condition. And the knowing group includes all of us. Those who've been playing along know that one of Denby's definitions of Snark is that it's nasty and that it's knowing. But is my understanding that if the knowing group includes all of us, then there is no such thing as a knowing group. Or at least there's nothing special about being knowing, which, again, undermines his entire thesis, but that is far from the worst thing about the Fourth Fit. But before we get into the Fourth Fit, I forgot something again. So I wanted to go back to the Third Fit, which says something about how private eye being able to use a process known as the photolitho offset allowed kind of anyone to do magazine writing, and therefore was a clumsy precursor to blogging. And I just think it's strange that he seems to see blogging as kind of an end product of this, or as the ultimate expression of Snark, when really blogging is just the latest medium for what has been a kind of universal, and here I think I am using universal the correct way, unlike the way he does most of the time, universal impulse. I think the impulse to mock is something that all cultures know and all cultures practice. And indeed, it is something that is sort of human. It's a human thing to do. And perhaps he would argue that snarking is different than mocking, but if you've been paying attention, you'll know that I don't think that definition is very valuable. Anyway, Fourth Fit. We'll try to keep this as short as possible since I don't want to waste any more of your time than I've wasted of mine, but it might be difficult. Again, I've kind of gone to crazy town with the text. I can't help myself. This is the chapter that involves the most troubling factual inaccuracies, and it is, perhaps not coincidentally, concerns itself a lot with the factual inaccuracies of snarkers. And it starts off right off the bat quoting my old stomping grounds Wonkette. It's his very first example of what he calls the first principle of Snark, the whatever principle, attack without reason. By the way, I'm just going to kind of ignore all these things that he calls the principles of Snark, because the shorter version of this entire chapter is here's a list of things that I don't think are funny and things I don't like. So this is his example for the whatever principle of Snark. Chelsea Clinton learns to speak like the humans do. This is from Wonkette. Give credit to the Clintons for the job they've done raising Chelsea. Chelsea was born deaf and dumb, a veritable wild child whose school teachers couldn't tame. But after 20-odd years, through Bill and Hillary's tutelage, she now speaks words. And since she's young, she can use this new talent to talk to other young people about her struggle with muteness. It wasn't an ordinary job getting this demon to speak like a person, but Bill and Hillary aren't ordinary people. Now, I understand that on first read you could think that was mocking Chelsea Clinton, but if you know anything about Washington or Wonkette or following political coverage at the time, or put this in context, it's actually mocking the idea that Chelsea Clinton's articulate nature is somehow a big success or a big surprise. It's mocking the idea that we should be blown away by the fact that Chelsea Clinton is out there doing a good job stumping for her mother, because she wasn't born deaf and dumb and wasn't a wild child, and she's kind of always been pretty much self-possessed. So, yeah, she turned out the way she did. Stop acting like it's a big deal. He seems to see nothing in it besides jealousy, but from the young women who write Wonkette, and that's one of the first of many factual errors in this chapter, because Wonkette hasn't been written by a woman in years. And I will link to the Wonkette-ers themselves defending themselves against the inaccuracies thrown against them, snarkily, one might even say, by Denby in my post when I linked to this particular video. And then I don't know what to say, except, again, most of the things that he uses as examples of snark in this chapter, I would not call snark, and I think Denby would agree. I think he would allow me to give expert testimony on snark. And I'm not sure even most of these things are trying to be funny. He uses he uses a lot of examples from the past year on the political campaign. And he says, outraged liberals, stop picking on Obama's baby mama. That was that was a Chiron on Fox News this past summer. And he uses that to illustrate a principle of snark. I don't think Fox News was trying to be snarky. I'm not even sure they were trying to be funny. Clever, maybe. But I think that was just dumb of them to do. And then next, he uses an example from Chris Matthews, who, if Chris Matthews had ever been snarky, I would like to earn a Nobel Prize. Thank you. I would also like my own show with him. The quote from Chris Matthews is, the reason Hillary Clinton's U.S. Senator, the reason she's a candidate for president, the reason she may be a front runner is that her husband messed around. I would say that's not exactly knowing or even nasty, and also Chris Matthews meant it in complete earnestness. He wasn't even trying to be funny. It fails snark on kind of every level. I think it's just something that David Denby was offended by, and that is what it has in common with almost everything else in this chapter. By the way, if you were wondering, the Depression, although obviously bad, was also a source of great humor. And you know what else? It wasn't snarky humor. It wasn't, because whatever its miseries, the country in the 30s and 40s was at peace with itself spiritually. We were all in the same boat. I don't think David Denby knows history very well, and also I would like him to ask a black person who went through that era about that, as well as a desperately poor person. The thing with the problem is now, he says, at the moment, the attitude is that there is no common boat. So obviously, we are a nation of boatless pink eye sufferers with manna in our ears, and I agree that that's a problem. Oh, Denby. See if there's anything really great for me to end on, because I know everyone wants to go watch the Oscars. Well, there's a defense of Thomas Cruise, which I think should be accompanied by a YouTube video asking him asking to leave Tom Cruise alone. He also weirdly declares that there's a ninth principle of snark, the gastronomic principle, which is attacking expensive, underperforming restaurants. Oh yes, who will defend the expensive, underperforming restaurants? Damn it, David Denby. Actually, he doesn't, which is also weird. He goes on to say that this is one place where snark is appropriate, which again undermines the whole point of the book. But at this point, I have stopped trying to understand why this book was published. Although I understand why it was written, because we all know that David Denby will spare no expense or trouble going to pleasure himself. I guess the last thing I'll end on is when he says he's not calling for humorlessness or even a puritanism of language. He says, quote, on the contrary, I am calling for a paganism of language. in which every sensuous apprehension of the surfaces of life is filtered through a developed sense of how the surfaces and the interiors fit together and what matters and what doesn't. From that, I can only conclude that life is some kind of architectural vagina, I guess. Anyway, I think I'll probably continue this project next weekend. So sorry if that's too long for some of you. For me, obviously, it's not long enough. Anyway, it's been fun chatting at you, and I will see you, but you won't see me next weekend. Enjoy the Oscars.